Canada. A land where winter isn't an obstacle, it's a way of life. When the air bites and the lakes freeze solid, something awakens here. Something that turns cold into passion, silence into motion, and strangers into teammates. It's more than a pastime, it's a heartbeat. It's hockey. But how did it all begin? How did a handful of men with wooden sticks on a frozen pond create one of the most beloved sports on Earth? And why does this game still define an entire country? To understand that, we have to travel back a century and a half, to a Canada still searching for who it was. The first game on frozen ground. In the late 1800s the nation was young, its cities small, its winters endless. When rivers froze, streets became skating lanes and fields turned to makeshift arenas. Soldiers, students, and workers strapped on blades, grabbed sticks, and chased whatever could slide across the ice. They were borrowing from old European games, England's bandy, Ireland's hurling on ice, but the frozen wilderness of Canada changed everything. The game became faster, tougher, sharper. The first recorded match took place in Montreal, 1875. 9 players aside, almost no rules, a wooden puck instead of a ball. It was chaotic, loud, and thrilling. Those players were students from McGill University. 2 years later they founded the world's first hockey club and wrote 7 simple rules. Use the stick only, no handling the puck, no roughing with the hands, and, most importantly, stop playing before the ice breaks. From Montreal the game spread like wildfire, to Kingston, Ottawa, Toronto, Quebec. Teams formed at schools, military posts, and community rinks. For a country newly born in 1867, it was a rare thing everyone could share. Hockey became the young nation's common language. From pastime to passion. By the 1880s, almost every major city had a team. Matches drew hundreds of spectators who crowded into freezing rinks, watching players without helmets or pads crash and spin across the ice. In 1893 Governor-General Lord Frederick Arthur Stanley donated a silver bowl for the best amateur club in the Dominion of Canada. The Stanley Cup was born. Soon came the sport's first heroes, Frank McGee of the Ottawa Silver Seven, who scored 14 goals in a single match despite being blind in one eye, and Lester Patrick, the visionary who would shape modern hockey for decades. Equipment improved, steel blades replaced wood, sticks were curved for control, goalies stew-ed newspapers under sweaters for protection. The game became faster, and far more dangerous. Newspapers began calling it Canada's national sport. And rightly so. Few things captured the country's spirit better than a frozen rink and a roaring crowd. The birth of the professional game. Around 1900 hockey turned serious. Star players were quietly paid under the table, even though the Stanley Cup was meant for amateurs. Fans demanded higher skill, more structure, real leagues. In 1904, in Houghton, Michigan, the first professional league appeared, the International Professional Hockey League, made up almost entirely of Canadian players. Only a few years later, Canadian pros followed suit. And in 1917, in wartime Montreal, the National Hockey League, the NHL, was founded. 5 teams began that inaugural season. The Montreal Canadiens, the Montreal Wanderers, the Ottawa Senators, the Toronto Arenas, and the Quebec Bulldogs. Rivalries burned hot. Cities fought not only for trophies, but for pride. The Wanderers folded after their arena burned down, but the Canadiens and Maple Leafs became dynasties, symbols of language, class, and culture. Hockey wasn't just a sport anymore. It was identity on ice. Between the wars, the 1920s and 30s brought speed, style, and heroes. A nation battered by the Great Depression still found joy in the rink. Radio carried the crack of sticks and the roar of crowds into every living room. The brightest star was Howie Morenz, the Blonde Blitz. Fearless, fast, adored by millions. His tragic death in 1937 after an on-ice collision plunged the country into mourning. His funeral was held inside the Montreal Forum, and tens of thousands came to pay their respects. Canada had lost more than a player, it had lost a piece of itself. War and rebirth. When World War II erupted, many players enlisted. On military bases across the world, soldiers still found frozen ponds to skate on. For a few minutes at a time, the war stopped, and home returned. After 1945, the country, and the game, boomed. Canada dominated the Olympics of 1948, 1952, 1956. New arenas rose, outdoor rinks glowed under floodlights, and every kid dreamed of the big leagues. By the mid-1950s, hockey wasn't simply Canada's pastime. It was its heartbeat. By the 1950s, hockey had become a weekly ritual. The glow of television brought the rink into every home, and with it a new kind of hero. In 1952, Hockey Night in Canada aired for the first time. Every Saturday evening, families gathered around black and white screens. Children stayed up past bedtime, parents leaned forward in silence, and when announcer Foster Hewitt cried, "He shoots, he scores," a whole nation seemed to shout back in unison. Among the legends of that era was Maurice "Rocket" Richard. His speed, his fury, his unstoppable drive made him more than a player. To French-Canadian fans he was pride itself. When the league suspended him in 1955, Montreal erupted in protest. The Richard riot wasn't just about hockey, it was about identity. It proved that this game had become woven into the fabric of who Canadians were. The Golden Age. The 1960s and 70s formed hockey's classic era. The original 6 teams, Toronto, Montreal, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, New York, created dynasties and lifelong loyalties. Children played before school, after school, and in their dreams. Hockey reflected the values Canadians wanted to see in themselves: discipline, teamwork, humility, endurance. The equipment evolved: helmets, fiberglass sticks, curved blades, but the soul of the game remained the same. The Summit Series, 1972. Then came 1972. The Cold War at its height. East versus West, communism versus capitalism, pride versus pride. 8 games between Canada's best NHL stars and the Soviet Union's machine-like team. Canadians assumed it would be easy. It wasn't. The Soviets skated faster, passed cleaner, and stunned the world. After early defeats, panic spread from coast to coast. But the team fought back. The final game in Moscow stopped the nation. Factories paused, classrooms rolled in TVs, and with less than a minute to play, Paul Henderson scored. That goal became a heartbeat in national memory. It wasn't just victory, it was resilience, belief, unity. For a country often defined by politeness and quiet strength, hockey had given it a roar. Expansion and new heroes. In the decades that followed, the NHL expanded southward. American franchises flourished, but the heart of the league, and its greatest talents, remained Canadian. The 1980s crowned a new icon, Wayne Gretzky, the Great One. Graceful, intelligent, impossibly consistent, he transformed hockey into art. Under his lead, the Edmonton Oilers built a dynasty and restored Canada's supremacy. Then came Mario Lemieux, Marc Messier, Steve Yzerman, and goaltending giants like Patrick Roy and Martin Brodeur. Each carried the same quiet pride, the sense that wearing a Canadian jersey meant representing something bigger than yourself. Women's hockey rose, too. In 1990 the first official Women's World Championship was held, of course, in Canada. Players like Hayley Wickenheiser and Cassie Campbell became heroes for a new generation, proving that passion knows no gender. Indigenous roots and diversity. Long before professional leagues, First Nations communities were already playing their own versions of the game. They shaped sticks from ash wood, carved pucks from bone, and turned frozen lakes into gathering places. In 1953, Fred Sasakamas became one of the first Indigenous players in the NHL. His story still inspires, proof that the game can unite rather than divide. Today, community programs across the country use hockey to reconnect Indigenous youth with heritage and confidence. Every skate mark on the ice carries part of that shared history. The Canadian soul on ice. So what makes hockey so profoundly Canadian? Maybe it's the contrasts, the cold air and the burning heart, the chaos and the grace, the individual brilliance within collective discipline. Hockey teaches you to fall and rise again. To sacrifice for your team. To keep skating, even when the puck isn't bouncing your way. In remote northern towns, families flood backyards each winter to build rinks. Under strings of lights, children play until their breath hangs like mist. The modern game. Today hockey is a global business, billion-dollar arenas, data analytics, international superstars, yet half of the NHL's players still come from one nation. Canada's imprint endures. Technology shapes training, but the soul of the game still lives on outdoor ponds. Community programs ensure that cost and geography no longer decide who gets to play. Hockey belongs to everyone. Diversity grows, women's leagues thrive, and Canada continues to export both players and passion to the world. Legacy and reflection. Hockey is more than ice and goals, it's a mirror. It reflects how Canadians see themselves: resilient, collaborative, quietly proud. When a child laces skates for the first time, when a father floods the backyard rink at dawn, when a city holds its breath for a Game 7 overtime, the nation reconnects with its essence. The sound of blades carving ice, the thud of a puck against the boards, the cheer that rises after a goal, that's the music of Canada. It's a story written in frost and light, a celebration of endurance and joy. And it's still being written every winter. Epilogue, south of the border. While Canada perfected its art, something unexpected began across the border. In the United States, a land of baseball diamonds and football fields, hockey found new believers. Canadian players crossed southward, American kids laced up skates, and before long, the Stanley Cup itself began traveling between nations. How that happened, how a Canadian invention became an American passion, is the next chapter of this story.